And all right, we're good to go.
Perfect. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Agricultural Advisory Meeting for 2026. I just wanted to take a quick moment to welcome the newest appointed committee member, Emily McCaig, which I know a lot of you are familiar with her already. Emily has replaced Lori Smith's appointed spot with her recent retirement, so I just wanted to take a moment to welcome her. And the first item of business today is the election of the chair and the vice chair. So these positions will run for the remainder of the 2026 council term. So that includes this meeting and one more meeting in June. So to begin, we'll start with the election for the chair. Are there any nominations to start? Any nominations for chair? And clerk staff
Sorry
is,
to
go
sorry to
ahead. Yeah.
interrupt, but
No, not at all.
I don't see everybody on the screen, and nothing wrong with you being on the screen, but I just see a couple of people there. So uh, if you allow me to just, and I've given this some thought, and it doesn't just an idea, but I'll elect or I'll nominate Blair Freeman.
Would anyone like to second that motion? Councillor Mackey? And Member Freeman, do you wish to have your name stand as chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee?
Sorry, what's the um for this meeting and next meeting, or what are you
That
asking here?
that's right. Yeah, so it'll be for this meeting and the next one. And clerk staff is more than happy and willing to help you move those meetings along if needed.
Okay, yeah, no, I just have a 1-year-old crawling over me right now, so I'm not sure I can be overly helpful today, but I don't mind doing the next meeting, but it's up to you.
We can try and see if anyone else would like to pose a chair for the committee if Blair is maybe not able to for this one.
I'm happy to do the next one. I'm not sure I can do this one right now.
Would anyone like to make another motion for chair for the committee?
Well, I don't want to be too bold, but I always like to move things along. So Paul McCrean, he's been smiling all along, and I thought maybe well, it's not a hard job to chair this meeting, but whatever. So, anyways, I've nominated two now. I'm going to drink the rest of my tea, and
Would someone
I,
like,
I'll
sorry,
decline, but I was going to nominate Keith Reed.
would someone like to make a motion to second that?
I'll support that motion.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Shirley there. I see she has had her hands up, so it's fine.
Okay, we'll take Councillor Keaveney on that one. Member Reed, would you like to have your name stand as chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee?
I also like to keep a moving meeting carrying on, but I wish to decline this morning. I have to leave early, so I apologize, but I'm not able to chair today.
No problem. All right, let's start from the top again. Would someone like to make a motion to move a motion to elect a chair for the committee for this meeting and for one more in June? Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to nominate Emily, recognizing that we had such a fabulous chair in Lori, and to allow Emily to have succession to that position. I would nominate Emily this morning.
Would someone like to make a
I'll second.
second that? Sorry, who was that? That was Brenda, I think.
Carrie
Oh,
Davenport.
Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. And Emily, would you like to have your name stand as chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee?
I am feeling a little bit too new to this, and having not attended a meeting, I'm going to decline. I would motion Simon Dubour to chair the meeting, though. Thank you.
Would someone like to second that motion? Councillor McQueen? Simon, would you like to have your name stand as chair of the Agriculture Advisory Committee?
Well, if you allow me to drink my tea in the meantime, I can do that just for the sake of moving it along.
That's great. And can we have a motion to close nominations? Councillor Milne? All right. So Simon DeBoer, you are acclaimed as chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee for the remainder of 2026. So next, I'll open the floor up for nominations for a vice chair of the committee. Are there any nominations? Nominations for vice chair? Councillor Keaveney?
I would nominate Gail Ardell as vice chair with her experience from the TBM Ag Committee.
And can I get a seconder for that motion? Warden Matrosovs? And Gail, would you like to have your name stand as vice chair of the committee for the remainder of 2026? Sorry, Gail, you're just on mute there.
Trying to run two computers here. I just returned from a trip, so I'm a little tired. It was a long night. Yes, I'll let it stand for vice chair. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And can I have a nomination to close votes? Councillor McQueen? Okay, and member Gail Ardell, you are acclaimed as vice chair for the remainder of 2026. And now Simon, if you'd like to go ahead and chair the remainder of the meeting, just let me know if you need any help with anything. So we're first going to have a delegation from Steve Duff, and then after that, we'll move into items for direction and discussion, and just item 5B and 5C need a mover and a seconder.
So you will guide me, or are you going to put an agenda on the screen, or from time to time, or?
I can do that for you. That's no problem.
Oh, but it is now a matter of introducing Steve Duff as the speaker.
Yes, please.
And I will gladly do that. I'd like to introduce Steve Duff. He is Agriculture and Economic Advisor for OMAFRA, and Steve and I go back a long ways, and I fully admire his knowledge about agriculture and agricultural trade. And the floor is to you then, Steve.
Thank you very much, Simon. Simon and I have known each other for a long time. It's been a great pleasure, and thank you for having me here today. I'm going to try to be brief. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to take you through a presentation that, just bear with me. Trying to find my. Sorry, there we go. Everybody see that okay? Put it on full screen mode. How's that? Can everybody see?
That looks good. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So this is a presentation that I do pretty regularly around the province in different forms. We don't have a ton of time today. What I want to try to do is talk a little bit about the agri-food sector in general in the province and some of the things that we are trying to accomplish and think about and some of the trends we're seeing and how Grey County at a level fits into that. This is the type of thing, quite frankly, I'd be more than happy to come back to your committee to point. Likely in person might be better if you do any of those, but to go through this in much more detail. This is something that, you know, can take at least an hour or more, and you kind of dig into the numbers in a different way. And this is just a smattering of it. Everything that's in this deck is in our ministry statistics site under what we call county profiles. So you can get this for Grey County, as well as all of the municipalities within Grey or every other part of the province. So we'll get into that. What I wanted to do was just touch briefly on what's called Grow Ontario, which is effectively the ministry and the provincial government strategy to try to expand agricultural production in the province. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'm going to kind of contextualize it a little bit. So Again, agri-food is a really, really important part, obviously, of the Canadian economy. You know, you guys probably understand that better than most, being part of an advisory committee. This is a key part of messaging that we have as a ministry across the province and across Canada, because not everybody really understands this, you know. And so, you know, when we're talking, you know, 51 billion in GDP, we're 6% of the provincial GDP from farm to fork. We're almost 11% of provincial employment farm to fork. You know, we're innovative, we're internationally focused, we're internationally competitive. All of these kinds of things. It's really, really significant, right? You've got thousands of people employed all over the place. There's a significant footprint in the industry, obviously outside of the major urban centers, which is also a really key and crucial part to this, etc. And so these are really important things. And again, if we had more time at a point, this is the type of thing where I take this diagram, for example, and I break it down for Grey County, or you know, Northumberland, we did some stuff recently for Cochrane District. Like we can do it for everybody, businesses, employment, that kind of stuff. One of the challenges that we're facing, however, and the Census of Agriculture, of which I'm probably Canada's biggest proponent of it, both as a government guy and as a farmer, and that's going to be measured here in May again, 2026. It'll be out in 2027 in terms of the information. This shows basically the census area of farms on active farms over the last 150 years or so. This is back to the very first census at the provincial level in Ontario in 1871 through to the most recent one, 2021. This is active land on farms. This is not all the land that we can farm. I'll come back to that in a second. But this is what's on active farms. The dark blue line is the total farm area. You guys in Grey County know that a lot of land on farms is either not considered workable, or it's basically in a state of sort of transition. And you certainly see that in your area, Bruce County. I farm up that way a bit. And, you know, the transition in pasture land, et cetera, is reflected in that decline in that dark blue line. And the light blue line, that's the land that we have in crops. That acreage has not really changed in the last 150 years or so. It peaked during World War I at about 10 million acres. It's not the same acres, right? You know, the Pearson Airport was once in that blue line, and it is no longer in that blue line. But we've been able to maintain that production. But as you can see on the right-hand side, those two bars are coming together. And, you know, we'll see what the next census does, but they're going to be together even further. And that challenge is that on active farms, there's less land across the province. And again, this varies by area to turn into active land. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And the line on there is the population. The population may have slowed down a little bit, but it continues to grow. And so we're feeding this larger population. And so how have we dealt with this? So this shows the last 25 years, but this is basically receipts or sales at the farm level for livestock and crops in the province, and then adjusted for price changes. In other words, we're trying to take out the impact of price and look at, well, how much have we been able to produce more of? Again, it's complicated because we produce, again, over 200 different commodities in Ontario, but those lines are moving up pretty rapidly, 57% in the last 25 years, and expected to continue to grow. Again, recognizing that through this 25 period, the land and crops on farms in this province was roughly 9 million acres every year. Again, not the same acres, but it's this idea of we're becoming considerably more productive. And I'll come back to why that's important. One of the things, again, that we're working pretty heavily on, and you're probably aware of this, and at a municipal level, like an organization like this, you'll have a better appreciation for some of the differences in data. But one of the things we've worked on for quite some time is a relationship with Municipal Property Assessment, MPAC. And the reason that's important is that data that MPAC has takes you down to the local level. It takes you down to a roll number level. And that roll number level, excuse me, can be defined in a bunch of different ways. But one of the key things about MPAC data, in particular the farm codes, the 200 codes as they're often referred to, is that once a piece of land is actively farmed and thus assessed from an MPAC point of view, and you can build in your FBR, et cetera, to it. We can talk about that later if you want. But for the most part, unless that land is paved over, unless it becomes Pearson Airport, as an example, it stays as a 200 code for forever, even if it's not actively farmed. And the data here, this is at a provincial level. I'll get into some Grey County stuff in a second, it basically has continued to show that over time across Ontario, there is more land out there that was once actively farmed. Now, again, there's different states of farms. That workable percentage, I'll come back to that, is important. But in combination with climate change, et cetera, this is something that's significant from the perspective of how do we try to provide incentives, et cetera. And Grow Ontario might be part of that to keep that land in production. So Grow Ontario really is about strengthening the system. It's got a number of objectives within it, which are geared to increasing agricultural production, increasing local food consumption. It's got stuff in there with respect to growing food processing, growing exports, et cetera, all of which are complemented by this idea of becoming more productive at the farm level and better utilizing the land we have available to us, either that which is actively used right now or that which we are not actively using. So extending that into Grey County specifically, this is something that we do to try to help municipalities and local organizations try to conceptualize or articulate the importance of agri-food within their community. And so again, we use a combination of the Census of Agriculture data because it's truly the only time that you get down to a municipal level or a township or even county level in the kind of detail that we like to have in this sector. We do, again, we have the luxury of a lot of good data in agri-food, and I think sometimes we don't fully appreciate that. So I'll read you the story again. This is all, you'll notice on every slide, there's a source for it. You can go in, and if you want to look at another county, like, I farm in Northumberland and Bruce County, so I can go in and look at Northumberland or Bruce numbers to the same degree. So in 2021, we had around 2,200 active farms in Grey County, and they generated around $560 million in farm sales. Cattle, grains and oilseeds, and dairy were the top three commodities. And this is the real sort of key thing. So what we try to do is articulate how that farm level agricultural production at a local level translates and generates GDP, gross domestic product, value added, across the whole province, right? Like, so, my corn that I'm growing in Northumberland, it gets sold outside of Northumberland. So it's spread across economic impact through the whole province. The same with the beef cattle that would be produced in Grey County, they're going to Cargill and Guelph likely or somewhere, et cetera. And so that $558 million in farm cash sales on Grey County farms supported about $1.2 billion in GDP through the value chain, farm level, input level, wholesale, food manufacturing, distribution, retail, food service, et cetera. It's this idea of what does it all sort of flow through. And that also supported across the province over 18,000 people. These are significant numbers. And again, a lot of jurisdictions I find, want to know, we're the largest, et cetera, that kind of thing. Everybody's got a big impact. Everybody is contributing to that first graph I showed. And that's really important. You're never too small in that contribution, in my opinion. And so within Grey County, the 2,178 farms had 3,020 farm operators. So again, as an example, on our farm, my wife and I are considered the farm operators. We're one farm in Northumberland, but we're two operators as farm operators go. They're actively farming 448, that should be 48,000 acres roughly in total farm area within Grey County. And within the sector specifically, again, recognizing that there's, you're bringing food in, all this kind of stuff. So this idea of how people are employed is a little bit different within the community versus across the province. But there's around 6,600 people working in Grey County in the agri-food sector, again, from farm to fork, and that's supporting about 2,200 different local businesses. And again, I could go into great detail on this in terms of how many vets there are and how many input suppliers. Those are all really important things to dig into what's going on in the local area. And again, happy to do that. When we increase farm sales in Grey County, every additional dollar of farm sales that we create is basically going to increase GDP by about $2.19. So there's significant contribution there. Every additional acre of land and crops increases our GDP by 4,100. And these are two really important numbers to come back to in a second with respect to that idea of Grow Ontario. So, as you guys know, right, we are losing more farms. We are losing actively farmland. That first graph is clear. Primary ag and food processing in particular are two productivity-based industries. So, and this is not unique to Ontario, it's Canada, international, US. And so the reality is that if you're not losing farms, if they're not becoming incrementally bigger, et cetera, you're likely not getting more efficient. Now, there is limitations to that. There are reasons why you don't want to lose farms or why there'd be reasons why you want to structurally support farms through a crisis like BSE or the hog crisis in '98, those kinds of things. But over time, farm size, processor size is going to get bigger. It's a necessity in terms of improving productivity. But the total farm area in Grey County fell quite a bit more on the last census, so from 2016 to 21, than it did at the provincial level. Now, again, total farm area is a bit of a tricky one because total farm area, again, a lot of times, especially in areas, I would say a place like Grey County are where we farm in Northumberland is a little bit similar. A lot of farms, when they transition out, for example, with retirement, etc., the total farm area ends up, your total farm area, and then you've got your land and crops. The land and crops will oftentimes be rented out in many cases. That's what goes back into the census, and then you lose the non-workable part of that farm in that total farm area. That, and I'll come back to that in a minute, but that's one of the more important things or pieces of that puzzle. Farm area fell as well, but land and crops also fell a little bit faster. Again, land and crops at the provincial level increased 0.3%. Again, why? Well, because we've been trying to gradually transition in certain areas of the province. Again, you can see it like, in my farm as an example, we've increased the land and crops in our farm significantly since 2006 when we bought the farm from my mother-in-law through removing fence bottoms and a whole bunch of different things. The total area on our roll numbers hasn't changed, but what we can do with that land has increased significantly. Come back to that in a second. The other thing about Grey County is that it's a very self-sufficient area in terms of food production, which goes to this idea of effectively you're a net exporter. You're providing product all across the province. And that's strength. There's a lot of strength in that for a variety of reasons, including that because you're producing a wide variety of things, it opens up the opportunity for people to see more opportunity in the things that they do and to be able to expand into a lot of different things, right? So you're producing, this data again is within that. And the idea here is to say, well, how much are we producing in the area relative to how much do we think local people based on our population in Grey County would consume? So to give you an example, now this is an example where things have declined, but it also creates opportunity for others. The asparagus line in there, in 2016, the amount of asparagus that was grown, at least in terms of a commercial sense on farms, amounted to about 98% of what we would calculate as the amount the population within Grey County would consume. That number declined to 28% in 2021. Again, there can often be structural reasons within that, frost kill, that type of thing. However, it goes to the idea that there's maybe opportunity for somebody with smaller land holdings or existing farms to grow, and you kind of go down the list. You get into beef cattle, obviously you're producing way above your weight, livestock in particular. Not unexpected, but it goes to the strength of the area. And also, again, recognizing that in pretty well every commodity we produce in this province, there's room to produce more, to displace imports, because we're importing everything, right? So the degree to which that creates an opportunity, especially in a bigger area like Grey County, where there's a wide variety of production, where there's efficient production, you've got some scale, it goes to this idea of greater opportunity. But again, it comes at a cost, right? Farmland values, rental rates are not cheap. They're going up quite significantly. You're at or about the provincial average, basically from both a rental rate and a farmland value point of view. This isn't, it's clearly not Stratford or Woodstock where, I heard of a guy the other day paid $63,000 for an acre in and around Stratford. So, sometimes you would wonder about the math on that. However, again, prices have went up, land values have went up in an area like Grey County where you've got basically a lot of transition. You've got a lot of sort of smaller acres in some circumstances. You guys can clearly see as well as I can, non-farm owners, that kind of thing coming in. And one of the things that is a big thing for me, and I've been doing some work in Peterborough County with a group called Farms at Work, is helping non-farm landowners understand the value of letting farmers use their land. We've been doing some mailings to people. We've been doing some a seminar recently where we had 50 non-farmer landowners come in and learn about what the benefits of having a farmer use their property would be. Be happy to do that on a one-off with Grey County, and I know Farms at Work would be happy to talk to you guys as well. The other aspect is that with climate change, things are changing, right? And we all know this, and there's a variety of things that come with that. But one of the more significant things in certain regions of the province, and I would say Grey County is one of them. We can see it if you drive up the Bruce, what we've been able to produce in that region as time has went by. The combination of a bit warmer climate, a little bit more moisture at key times often, and certainly a longer growing period. Shorter or earlier last frost and a much earlier last frost and a much later last frost, and that's a big deal. And so this area, basically the Canadian Climate Atlas, and there's a lot of really interesting things in there if you're interested, would suggest that up through Owen Sound in the next 50 years, the temperature, the climate, etc., starts to get very close to what Chatham has been for the last 50. Now, again, that does come with some variability, and sometimes the carrying capacity of heavier land in particular is not really suited for that. However, these do create opportunities from a land use perspective, especially from my perspective in smaller land holdings, where you have certain aspects of that. So in terms of underutilized farmland, which is really, from my perspective, one of the key things to think about. And again, the numbers are, we can discuss and debate about the numbers, etc., but the concept is pretty clear. And everybody, I think, who farms can drive around communities and see this. And I see this a lot. I could talk about just about every part of the province if you wanted to hear me talk about where I think there's opportunity. But in Grey County, there's about 820,000 acres that are assessed as farming by impact. So again, a property, because it's assessed by impact, does not mean it is currently farmed. And again, the data that we would link to the farm business registration number will give us a look into this, as does the census data. 2021, there was again 448,000 acres roughly of farmed land according to the census. So the difference there is land that was once farmed and is not actively farmed now. Now, it might be in various states, etc., of use, but it is still 200 coded. Now, again, remembering that farmland assessment does not necessarily mean farmland zoning. I grow about 1,000 acres of corn and soybeans in Northumberland, Ontario, and outside of, I think it's about 180 acres, all of that is zoned rural. It's not zoned prime ag. And so, again, there's multi-use on that. So it's assessed from a farming point of view, but it doesn't mean I have to farm it, right? And so that's one of that farming is its only use. So that's also something, my guess is that that's somewhat true in certain parts of Grey County as well, but I don't know that specifically. However, what I do know is that on the census forms, etc., about 35% of the total farm area on any active Grey County farm is considered rough and managed pasture, woodlands, and wetlands. So again, that goes back to that very first graph where the thing is falling over time. The debate then is that 35% convertible? How much of that is pasture, for example, that could be converted into other uses? How much of it is rough land that's not being pastured that could be pastured? That's actually a pretty big one across Ontario, which people tend not to think about, because pasturing is a real opportunity in this province in ways I think that should be utilized. And then ultimately, how much is woodland and wetlands that either we can't convert or don't want to convert? But there's still use within that: silviculture, maple syrup, and a variety of different things. And in addition, there's also a lot of acres, not just in Grey County, but around the province that are 100 coded for our municipal friends here. That's vacant land. That, again, depending on your region, is more or less likely farmland that's probably never been used for farming, but does have agricultural potential. So again, it's a very relative thing, and that's been one of the things we've been trying to promote. So from my perspective, the idea with today quickly is to sort of whet your appetite about this. I know everybody's trying to think about how they grow, how they fit into the puzzle. I think, again, Grey County is a huge contributor. And I think there's, like a lot of areas of the province, I think there's potential for more. I'm going to stop there, answer some questions. And like I said, I'd be happy to come back and talk about a more detailed presentation on this at a point if you want. And we can certainly do this into 2027 when the next census comes out and there'll be more info to think about. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to any questions. That's a really fast presentation for me, quite frankly. So I apologize if it seemed quick, but that's what we got. So anyways, happy to answer some questions.
Any questions for Steve Duff? He certainly talks fast. I cannot even try to match his speed.
Hey, Simon, I have a question for Steve.
Okay.
Steve, are there any gaps in the available infrastructure in our part of the world that you would see as a barrier to growth and increases in productivity?
I think there's a few. Again, I think I'd have to go into it's Blair, right? I'd have to go into the data a little bit more detail. Like in certain sectors, like abattoirs, for example, are a pretty big barrier, right? And for any of you guys that have heard me speak before, like we do a lot of direct to consumer beef. It's one of the things we're doing that before we were cropping. And quite honestly, if it wasn't for a local abattoir who's a buddy of mine, actually, I don't think we'd do it. But it's been a pretty good business for us. And I think that in particular, especially in an area where there's grazing potential, which Grey County has, in my opinion, is a huge opportunity still. But there is some barriers in that regard. And I think distribution, the ability for people to get product into, like, I don't know, my younger son's a butcher at a place down in St. Catharines, right? And he's now their procurement guy, so he's going around and they only buy local direct. Like it's one of those kind of restaurants, and they're fairly big and growing. And he's like, it's hard to find the right people, and so that kind of infrastructure, I think Blair is a significant issue, not just in Grey County. I think you have the benefit of having a really good infrastructure from crop inputs. Like the people providing advice to farmers in Grey County is second to none, really. And it's the same in many areas of that sort of northern middle tier of the province, compared to some other areas, I think. So that's a real bonus, but it's that middle part, especially for some of the mid-sized farms, I think, that is limiting ability for them to take advantage of it. People like me, frankly, that have off-farm income and own a farm and could do more with it without even really realizing it. So,
thank you, Steve. Are there any more questions?
It looks like there's 2 questions, both from Councillor Mill and Councillor McQueen.
Okay. You go ahead.
I'll jump in, Simon, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
Good morning, Steve. And my question is, you mentioned you had met, or someone had met with a group of non-farming farmland owners over, I think it was the Peterborough Way.
Yeah.
What are some of the reasons why they weren't actively or using the farmland, and what was used to lure them into the business, so to speak, or into, considering letting their land be farmed?
Yeah. So again, as you go around the province to this point, there's a lot of areas where there's a lot of, as I call it, 200 coded land, right? That does not have an FBR with it. And you will see, like, up where I grew up, which is south of Peterborough, Warkworth area, the Trent Hills is the municipality. There's a ton of it. But a lot of that land has a 1 acre parcel on it, or house, right? So what happens is a lot of people, I think, don't even pay attention, and they don't even really realize that the other 39 acres that they own of the 40 is actually farm coded. They're just paying residential rates. They don't know the difference, right? They might look, it's common, you guys probably see this or can appreciate it where you are, but oh, there's some rail fence there. Oh, like this is actually pretty open, like I can, we can snowmobile in this and I don't have to worry about running over trees and things like that. You know what I mean? So what we did, I worked with farm, this is something that has been kind of a pet project of mine for a long time. And I'd be honest with you, I'd like the whole province to do this, but so basically Farms at Work worked with the county of Peterborough through the Greenbelt to identify anybody that they could send a letter to in that region that has this criteria, right? You've got a 200 coded parcel of land, but there's no farm business registration number tied to it, which means somebody isn't using it. Sent them a letter. We got a bunch of people out to a meeting in Millbrook, and we kind of went through all the benefits and reasons why it might be beneficial. And, in my opinion, there's a lot of people, sure, they'd love the property tax reduction, but there's a lot of people who would like to maybe generate a little bit of income. There's a lot of people who might like to see the land not grown up in weeds and don't really understand or know how to do that, right? And again, it varies by area, right? If you're in the middle of Grey County, I'd say the average person living in the area probably has a better clue of that than they do in, say, the Durham region, But so it was really about that. And one of the things that Farms at Work is doing for Peterborough County is, and sort of that general region, is they've got a website up for helping, for having people, basically it's like Tinder for farmers, where you're saying, hey, I got some land to rent, who wants to use it, and vice versa. But, and again, I think, you know, this is something, Brian, like for me, again, it depends on the area, but certain farm communities, frankly, are not that easy for smaller businesses, and especially if you're not from the area, right?
Yeah.
To get into and figure out how to do it. You know, if you get lucky, like, you know, I rent a bunch of land in Northumberland there. You know, it's just kind of me. The guys, people buy this property, and out of my nature, I don't have a problem driving into somebody's driveway and knocking on the door. But if it had been reversed, they weren't coming looking for me when I'm combine and saying, "Hey, do you want to farm my field?" That's not how they operate, right? Those are the kinds of things that really came out to me at that meeting in Millbrook a couple of weeks ago. And quite honestly, that what they're doing there is it can be replicated all across the province. I've been doing a little bit of work with Frontenac County, that same degree. Now, again, Frontenac's different. There's a lot of trees, a lot of rock, a lot of swamp, right? So it's a little bit different, but it's the concept that gets out there, right? So I'd be happy to talk to you guys more about it at a point, or I know Farms at Work would be happy to talk to you guys about it if you're interested, because they are passionate about this.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
So we got Paul McQueen has a question for Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is really good information. And as yourself, Steve, is a farmer, and you can relate to it. And both some of us on here are farmers as well.
Yeah.
You got a lot of you shared a lot of information here, but I will say a comment that, you know, I've farmed all my life, and we're sixth generation in our farm, but cycles change in the sense of gate receipts. If all of a sudden cash cropping is low, you know, that changes where cattle are high. Right now we're in that cycle, but there's not the cattle, and, you know, there's, you know, and you can relate to that. But one thing that Grey County Federation of Ag has always had a bit of an issue was good farmland planted in trees. And I mean, it's up to the property owner who owns that land to be able to do that, and understandably able to do that. But, you know, there's probably a lot of farms out there. You can see the original fence rows, but they've grown up wild and stuff. I don't know if there's the ability to re-clear those lands because it was originally farmland, but then it gets to a certain point, it becomes a significant woodland, and there's a lot of things that can vary, similar to your example.
Yeah.
You said it. You know,
there are pieces of that, like the RELT program, the Resilient Ag Landscapes program, has aspects of that. I've experienced it personally, Paul, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, and again, I think that from my perspective, it does go to this idea of people understanding the value of farming, and not, you know, again, like, to give you a very specific example, a neighbor of ours where my parents live, my parents have a rural property now, the farm's been gone a long time, but across the road has been a long-time neighbor of ours, and it's been owned by people from Toronto my entire life. But a local farmer in the area has rented it, like, he's now deceased, but rented it my entire life. I'm 54, okay? Mm-hmm. So a couple of years ago, when the farmer passed away, I know these people. I went to them and said, "I'd like to rent your farm. It's a beautiful hills. It's what people think in Northumberland County, right? And it's always just pasture. I'm like, I want to pasture cattle on this farm. It's perfect for me because my parents are right there. I can do a whole bunch of things with it. No, we're planting trees and we're letting it grow up." Now, again, in fairness, it's been in agriculture my entire life. So it's not like they haven't contributed, you know what I mean? But I don't completely understand why they felt that way now, right? But I think there is, if you go into the data and you drive around, because I've done this as a bit of an exercise, there's a lot of land that could easily be reclaimed and done in a way that's still environmentally sustainable. You know, as somebody that pastures cattle in woods, there's ways to do it effectively. Now, again, you diminish your hardwood capacity, that kind of thing. But there's ways to do it in ways that I think we don't explore enough. And I think that has become a bit of a detriment to certain sectors, right?
Well, I'll fall into my next question because I know we have to move on, but just on the sense of I think when people plant trees, they have the ability to do a woodlot management plan, and then that also is the 25% of the 100% too.
That's right.
But more importantly is young farmers. The price of farms are through the roof, and I think if there's the ability to reclaim farmland for young farmers from the ability of affordability, I think that's something I think we really have to look at, because, you know, the price of, you know, between 20 and 30,000 an acre here in Grey County is you go to the bank and I got to borrow $3 million to buy a farm. It's like, okay, what's your job? Right.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, I think to your point, right? Like, and again, there's a lot, again, this idea of thinking a little bit differently, right? So, I know a guy at home, to give you an example, who doesn't own any farmland, but pastures quite a few cattle because he rents a couple different farms, and he's gotten burned a little bit by that. He's put up some infrastructure and then had to adjust. But again, it's a different business model. And again, I think in certain areas, in Grey County, to me, would be one where if there's ways to connect these people, there's probably ways to make that relationship work to help deal with the issue you're referring to, right?
Well, thank you for that.
It's very individual, though. That's the other thing I think that people struggle with. Like, it's not something that I can get up here and profess to be. It's gonna increase your acres 100,000. You know what I mean? But everybody seeing where it fits, I think, is really the key. So
well, and just last comment is farming in the 50s with a 40 horsepower, or the 60s with a 40 horsepower tractor, and every 100-acre farm had a farmer on it. And farming has changed where you get the 300 horsepower tractor and the big equipment. You need the bigger fields and all that stuff. So the dynamics for economies of scale have changed. It's changed as well, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Any more questions for Steve, except for the fact that we may want him back and sometimes to come and elaborate a little more on what's going on in agriculture. And thank you very much, Steve, for this presentation. And it certainly, I don't know about the other participants on the call, but it certainly has put a lot of thought in my mind of all things that are changing around us.
I'm happy to come up. I go up to the soccer sale in Wyerton every spring and fall, so I'm always the next
sale is the 7th of May, I believe, in Wyerton.
I was actually just looking for that. So you think it's May 7th?
You can see it on the Beef Farmers of Ontario's website.
Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you.
There.
I hadn't seen that yet. Very good.
Quick question, Simon, just to Steve. Is there something Grey County through policy or planning policy should be changing or should be considering or thinking about?
I'd have to think about that one, Paul. But I don't, in my opinion, this is my opinion, not a ministry opinion. Okay. I think a lot of what we're facing in Ontario in this context, like you talked about, is more about application than rules. I think it's more about being able to sort of see, like, take a piece of land and kind of see the opportunity in it and see how it might fit somebody's circumstance. You know what I mean? I don't know that the rules prevent any of these things that we're talking about. It's just how people view it is, as you guys know, we have a very, like, there's certain commodities, there's certain things we do, right? But the reality is the opportunity is pretty wide. And a lot of the people looking to get into the sector, like, again, 2% of the farms in Ontario produce 65-70% of the production, right? So the other 98% are doing things way different than that other 2%, right? So it's the ability to sort of let that slide in, I think, is what challenges some areas, and some areas more than others. I've had this issue in Hastings County, right? They have a lot of land in the northern part of Hastings County, which could have some really interesting things done with it, but you're not growing good corn on it. And that seems to be an issue in my experience in that region, in terms of being able people to go, oh, well, it's no good for anything because I can't plant corn on it. Well, it's good for a lot of other stuff.
Maybe it's just about education.
A little bit, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, quite honestly, you guys have a fabulous resource in Grey Ag Services, right? Like, it's unfortunate. Well, I'm not going to get into that because this is a ministry issue, but it's unfortunate there isn't more of that around the province, frankly.
Well, indeed. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff that we can do in agriculture, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but with the widening gap between Canada and the United States right now, it opens up a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to get into a different type of agriculture, grow different crops or whatever.
Yep.
Processing probably will be the weak link in this all.
For sure. For sure.
Thank
you very much, and like I said, I'm happy to have further conversations. If you're interested, just let me know.
Thank you very kindly, Steve, and we'll talk to you again some other time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I am gonna lean on Brittany for the next item on the agenda and what we need to do.
So I did actually miss item 3, declaration of interest. So if you wanted to ask the group if there was any declarations of interest at this point.
I'll gladly ask, is there any participant that has to declare a conflict of interest in this meeting? That doesn't sound like it, so thank you very much for the opportunity, Brittany, and thank you very much for your honesty. So we'll go to the next item then.
All right, so we're moving on to item 5A, and that's a verbal update on renewable energy projects. And this will come from Director Scott Taylor.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Scott, and you go take the floor there, Scott.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to members of the committee. Thanks for your time here this morning. So at the December Agricultural Advisory Committee, feels like a lifetime ago now already, but there was a request for more information on energy projects on agricultural lands, and more specifically, there was some talk about ground-mounted solar and what do the current rules allow and what do they not allow in that regard. So staff have done a bit of research, and I just wanted to share some of the highlights with you here and certainly turn it back through the chair for any questions. But basically, the province has made it clear that they need to grow the electricity generation and transmission capacity to fuel both the province's growth, but also to fuel the further electrification that's needed to support our future lifestyles. So Ontario's Independent Electricity System Operator, also known as IESO, estimates that Ontario is going to need 75% more electricity than we currently produce by the year 2050. As such, we're seeing a changing policy environment, both policies and legislation in that regard, and we're seeing increased procurement from IESO, which is driving a lot of the conversation here locally on what might be permitted and what might not be. In some cases, some of that procurement would come in our settlement areas. In other cases, we're talking about lands that might impact agriculture and just thinking back to Steve's presentation in that regard, whether some of these projects would take lands out of production in that regard. So for energy proposals, it's a multi-jurisdictional approach in this regard. There can be approvals needed at the provincial level, including what's known as a renewable energy approval. There can also be the need for contracts through IESO to produce and sell the power back to the grid, assuming you're not just sort of powering your own farm in that regard. And then at the municipal level, there's the need for municipal support resolutions, as well as their own permitting processes locally, which sometimes can include zoning amendments or a site plan control agreement or building permits in that regard. And I'm going to expand on a few of these terms here in just a second. I will say that in the past couple of years, the most recent or the most common type of energy projects we're seeing proposed in gray are still wind projects, solar projects, and what's known as battery energy storage systems. And so the acronym for that is often referred to as BESS, B-E-S-S. And so just in terms of that changing framework in that regard, in 2024, the province updated the provincial planning statement to now include electricity generation facilities, transmission facilities, and energy storage systems as part of the definition for on-farm diversified uses. And for those that might not be familiar, on-farm diversified uses are widely permitted across the countryside, so both in agricultural and rural lands. But these are the types of uses that need to be limited in scale. And so the current rules restrict them to a maximum of either 2% of the farm or no more than 1 hectare. And so we see a lot of these on-farm diversified uses across the county in terms of agritourism uses and in terms of, on-farm manufacturing shops, like we see a lot of in Grey Highlands and Southgate in that regard, and some of those experiential agricultural opportunities. But through the 2024 provincial planning statement, the province has also said energy generation or energy storage systems can be included under that definition in that regard. And so within a prime agricultural area, farmers under the PPS would be permitted to have these energy systems, provided they don't encompass any more than 1 hectare of the farm. if something is looking at, if someone is looking at something more large scale, then there would need to be further assessment done to see whether it's appropriate. There's specific provisions in the provincial planning statement that take you through the tests that need to be met in that regard. But largely speaking, those smaller scale ones, the ones on 1 hectare or less, are much easier to see supported. But aside from the provincial planning statement policies, the province has also introduced direction through the recent procurement intakes through IESO on what types of projects will or will not be eligible for a contract. And this acronym won't mean much to anybody, but the LT2 request for proposals, which was issued, I believe, in 25, maybe back in 24, had very specific rules to say that they're not accepting or they're not offering contracts for energy proposals on specialty cropland. So in gray, that would be our apple and vineyard lands. And they're also not offering contracts for ground-mounted solar facilities on prime agricultural lands. So certainly nothing to say you can't still put a solar panel on top of a drive shed or a barn, but you can't take a 50-acre field and convert it to solar panels and expect that you're going to get an IESO contract in that regard. They further specified that where they are looking at projects on agricultural land, so this could be other types of energy projects like, say, a wind turbine, there is the need for an agricultural impact assessment, which is a study that looks at the potential for impacts on farmlands in that regard. I do want to clarify that what I've just spoken to are the prime agricultural lands, and in Grey County we also have a lot of rural land, which is generally not quite as high quality farmland, but could still have contracts in that regard. And through you, Mr. Chair, I do see Blair's or Member Freeman's hand up. Would you like to take that question now or wait till the end of my talk in this regard?
There's two hands up there. Go ahead, Blair, if you...
Yes, I just was looking for clarity, Scott. When you said prime agricultural lands, so you mean specifically that it must be zoned rural in order to do a 50-acre ground mount solar project, for instance?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, generally speaking, in order to get that contract for the ground-mounted solar, then they would have to demonstrate that it's not the high-quality farmland, and therefore doesn't qualify as the prime agricultural. So in Grey County, sort of the general terminology there would be rural lands, and not always, but in most cases, those are more your classes 4 to 7 farmland in that regard. Though we do still have pockets of some quality land in the rural as well.
I also thought Brenda had her hand up there a minute ago.
I can wait till Scott's done. Thanks.
Okay. You go ahead, Brenda.
Okay, so just to carry on, and I won't be too much longer, I promise. Another key element of getting a contract through IESO now, and this is a change from a number of years ago, is the need for what's called a municipal support resolution. So very early on in the process, somebody proposing an energy project that hopes to get a provincial contract needs to go in and chat with the municipality, show them what they're proposing, help them understand what's going to be needed there, and seek support from the municipality. And so members of the committee might recall a number of years ago, under a previous provincial government, there was what was called the Green Energy Act. And the Green Energy Act really took a lot of those approvals for energy projects outside of municipal hands and made it purely a provincial approval. So municipal policies didn't apply in that regard. I think the provincial government of the day faced both some support and criticism, but on the criticism side, there was the thought that some municipalities didn't want such energy projects in their municipality, but didn't have any veto power, so to speak. So the current provincial government has introduced this notion through IESO of municipal support resolutions. And a municipal support resolution is an in-principle support for the project. So it's not an approval, but it's in-principle support, which is not legally binding. And if you like, it represents a point in time. So when that municipal council voted on that municipal support resolution, whether to offer it or not, that's what the opinion was of the day, but that can change over time. So the municipal support resolutions come early in the process. They come ahead of any municipal planning applications or provincial approvals in that regard. Municipalities can also make such municipal support resolutions conditional on meeting certain tests, or in some cases also conditional on what's called a community benefit agreement. So a community benefit agreement is a contract negotiated between the proponent and a municipality that requires the proponent or the developer to provide certain things to the municipality. In some cases, that could be specific funding, or it could be amenities or mitigation measures to the local community or neighborhood in that regard. Community benefit agreements in the past have included, in some cases, lump sum payments or payments over time based on output. They've also provided things like support or training to municipal emergency services, I think firefighters in that regard, with respect to, say, things like wind turbines or these battery energy storage systems. Community benefit agreements appear to be commonly used throughout the process, but they're not 100% needed, or they're not required in order to get a contract under IESO. But what is required is the municipal support resolution. And so if a municipality has a framework and seeks a community benefit agreement there, then although it's not required by IESO, it might help the municipality in getting towards that municipal support resolution, which is required by IESO. Municipal support resolutions are particularly key for proponents as well, given some changes to the legislation, in that under the Planning Act now, if somebody comes in and applies for a zoning bylaw amendment for say, a new wind farm, the municipal council can either approve or refuse that, but the municipal council's decisions are no longer appealable to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So particularly if I'm a proponent that's looking at this new wind farm, then I really want to get my ducks in a row to get that municipal support resolution to understand locally whether there's an appetite for this or not. Because if I go through and invest all that money and time into the planning process and the renewable energy approval process, and then the municipality turns me down, I have no recourse any longer through the Ontario Land Tribunal, i.e. I can no longer appeal it. It doesn't mean municipalities can act with impunity in this regard. They still have to act in good faith, and there's always the possibility for a municipal council's decision to be challenged through the courts. But strictly speaking, it can't be challenged through the Ontario Land Tribunal anymore. And so then getting back to the provincial approvals, and I promise I'll wrap up here soon, the renewable energy approvals issued by the province are required for various projects that are above a certain base plate capacity. So if we're looking at wind or solar projects, the very, very small projects that you might be using to power your own operation might not need an approval in that regard. But certainly when you're getting into selling back to the grid, then you would need that renewable energy approval issued by the province, in addition to any municipal approvals. Battery energy storage systems, if they're simply storing energy, do not need a renewable energy approval. But if they're co-generating, so let's just say they have a series of solar panels as well as the battery energy storage, then they would need a provincial approval in that case. Furthermore, when we're looking at the siting of these renewable energy projects, in some cases, the transmission lines to get the power from the generation source back to the grid might also be subject to an environmental assessment process. So think some of the major lines like the Bruce to Milton line from a number of years ago, that of course went through an EA process in that regard. And so finally, many municipalities across Grey don't have comprehensive energy policies in place in their official plans and zoning bylaws at this stage, because we were all made to remove them when the previous provincial government introduced the Green Energy Act. And since that act has been repealed, municipalities haven't necessarily all taken the steps to put those policies back in place in that regard. That said, municipalities are starting to get these proposals for these energy facilities, and many are interpreting their current official plan and zoning documents to suggest that for some of these larger scale uses, you would need either a zoning bylaw amendment or site plan control agreement to situate the proposals locally. And so to summarize, the policy and procurement process does support some level of energy generation and transmission on agricultural lands. But there are some restrictions in place both on the size of the project as well as the type of energy being produced on prime ag land. So think back to the discussion on ground-mounted solar in that regard. Those won't be issued comments or contracts for prime ag lands. And so they're both provincial and local requirements as well to help protect agricultural through the use of agricultural impact studies and other tools in that regard. So I realize that was quite a mouthful. Certainly happy to take any questions or follow up at a later time if there's any questions through the committee. Turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Scott, for that presentation. And indeed, there's a lot there. Brenda, you have your hand up. I'll give the floor to you.
So I don't know that it's so much a question, but I will say that at Sheep Day at Grey Bruce Farmers Week, there was definitely like a 45-minute presentation on solar grazing in Grey County specifically, because actually most of Bruce doesn't have lands that are allowed to do this. So it was very interesting to see the overlay of the maps of what lands are allowed, overlaid on top of existing transmission lines that could actually take this energy. So it's definitely not a simple process. I think it is good that there are so many layers and community support needs to be in there. But it was also interesting to hear how the solar, I don't know, setup, whatever, the entrepreneurs who are trying to get all these contracts, they are also learning a lot from sheep farmers. Like there's a lot of this going on in Alberta, especially with large solar arrays out there that are grazed by sheep, and they are definitely learning about making their panels more suitable to having farming happen concurrently, as well as with fencing needs and all that sort of thing. So it is interesting to see this whole industry evolve. It'll yeah, but it's definitely, it's not an easy thing to get this started on any patch here in Grey County, I think.
Thank you, Brenda. Now I see 3 hands up, and I don't want to be selective or so, but I'll let Gail go first.
Just unmute myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a few questions. And a question to Scott. I didn't hear specialty ags mentioned. And we have quite a bit of specialty ag in our urban area. And we've had, many discussions with the province of trying to rezone that to development lands or anything along those lines for housing, affordable housing. And the province has definitely said, no, we can't do that. But we haven't had anybody come in asking for renewable energy. But I'm just wondering, can they pick a specialty ag to be able to put a solar farm in? Because we do have some lands available in the Thornbury area, and I'm not sure if I would want them down there, but there are other lands in Clarksburg too that are zoned specialty ag, and they're not being farmed. So the question to Scott, is anything being stopped on specialty ag, or can they do renewable energy on those?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for your question, Member Ardell. I apologize, maybe I didn't read my own notes carefully enough. With respect to the specialty croplands, there are restrictions. So in that most recent intake through IESO, the LT2 RFP, they excluded applications on specialty croplands.
Okay.
So they weren't issuing any of those larger contracts. It doesn't mean a farmer can't still put something in to power their own operations, perhaps. But based on the most recent intake, you wouldn't see, say, a widespread solar farm on specialty croplands in that regard. With respect to some of your other points, there has been a changing landscape in the province on the ability to redesignate specialty croplands for other uses, such as urban uses or housing. And up until 2004, arguably that was the most protected land in the province, the highest restrictions at a provincial level. The province has relaxed a little bit of that with the 2024 provincial planning statement. And so there is a little bit more opportunity now to see that. But certainly locally, both at Town of Blue Mountains and Meaford, as well as at the county, we do still have fairly restrictive policies in place there with respect to urban style growth coming out into what we'll call the apple and grape lands, if you will.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair?
There you go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, so we met with the province last year at AMO, and they definitely said, no, we're not going to be rezoning specialty eggs for affordable housing. We got a flat no. So maybe it may be in other areas, but not in the town of the Blue Mountains. So we've tried several times, and I'm not sure. I see the warden on there. I don't know if it was mentioned again at Roma, if we could rezone some of those lands to affordable housing, because we just can't get affordable housing. But that's a different topic. But I'm just wondering, with the specialty ag, the province hasn't switched any of ours, so I'm not sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. So now, again, 3 hands up. Is it any follow or order if that you see a number of? If not, okay, I'll give the floor to Paul McQueen. And go ahead, Paul.
So Andrea was maybe going to follow up with Gail's comments. So maybe
Okay,
if Andrea wants to
sorry.
go first. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you go
Sure.
ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, Member Ardell, with her public hat on here, also sits on our council. And yes, we haven't had any further movement on that. And the challenge that maybe isn't quite understood across the way is the parcels of specialty ag that Member Ardell is referring to are smaller parcels that are now encompassed and kind of surrounded about with the urban growth that's been occurring in Clarksburg and Thornbury. And as I've learned from her, when it's too small of a parcel, it's not operational for our orchard owners to pick up and start rehabilitating as orchard, for example. So that's been the kind of unique scenario we have been pitching to the province, that in this particular case, and I was benefited from receiving from Jim Urim, who used to sit on our council, who was a planner back in the day when they were looking at this. And he actually shared with me a report from the 1970s that had identified tiers of potential specialty ag identified in the Thornbury area that weren't meant to never be developed. It was done in a tier system where they said, these ones here should be the ones that I'm sorry, I've got a cat behind me that's making a lot of noise. This section, use last, but this section you might convert into development beforehand. It was never a cut and dry. So there's been a disconnect over the years between what was originally intended. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, through you, Mr. Chair, could I respond to that one just briefly?
You go right ahead, Scott.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for your comments, Member Ardell and Warden Matrosofts. One of the things that the province has been talking about for a number of years is they have clear guidelines on how we map and identify prime agricultural areas. And they use a technique that's known as a LEAR study, a Land Evaluation Area Review Study. But they've been very clear, at least for my entire career, that those LEAR studies aren't to be used for the identification of specialty croplands. And when I say identification of specialty croplands, it means both adding new specialty croplands and potentially considering where to take away existing specialty croplands if they're not used anymore. And so for a number of years, the folks at OMAFA have been talking about, could we develop those guidelines for specialty croplands, but it's just sort of hasn't made its way to the top of the priority list yet. But I think we've been at least locally asking them to see if they can bump that up, because that is important to areas of our municipality. And going back to Steve's presentation, as we consider the impacts of climate change, even we might see differing levels of agricultural opportunity across the county, and having some clear guidance on where we can add or remove these specialty croplands would be important. So yeah, I don't want to take up too much of the committee's time on this, but certainly happy to chat online or chat staff to staff with town staff on this topic further, for sure.
Well, thank you, Scott, and don't feel bad about taking time, because these are very weighty issues, and it's always good to get clarification on what's going on. And so I apologize for calling everybody by their first name, because I virtually know everybody here on a first name basis. So maybe doesn't sound very professional, but that's the way it is. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just wanted good conversation, and this is a good committee to talk about this. I want to thank Scott for bringing this forward. I think we should, through the Ag Services, I think we need to move this forward for the opportunities of those in Grey County that it does. We have marginal lands, pasture lands. If it works, I think what Brenda was saying, if there's some mapping, it would be good. I think proactively looking at where it could work, the high price of farms, as I mentioned, if there's opportunity to help offset those high costs, I think that's something to look at. I know that probably everybody knows Don Lewis, previous mayor and county councillor Warden, has that solar farm down Southgate where it is able to have sheep pasture, and I think that's really a win-win, because then you're still preserving agricultural use, but also farm income as well. So I just think that I would like to see this move forward, and the opportunities that could, I don't know if there's somebody from the ministry that could, or maybe a one-day thing that could be set up through the ag office. I just think there's opportunity to maybe jointly with Grey County, with Scott and other ones, just to pull that all together. There's mapping. I think there could be a great opportunity for some of those in Grey County.
Thank you, Paul. And Blair, not to say any less important than anybody else, but I'll give you the floor.
Thanks, Simon. Scott, maybe I missed it, but did you clarify what this means for property tax assessment? So if you take 50 acres out of your farm and set up ground mount solar, how would that impact property taxes assessed in a particular township?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your question, Member Freeman. I didn't touch on that. That's something we can look further into. Yeah, my pure guess is if you were to obviously remove land from farming purposes, then you might not be eligible for that farm tax rate anymore. And if you're adding value to the land through what you've built on the land, whether they be solar panels or wind turbines or what have you in that regard, then there could be assessment increases. But that is just speculation on my end, and certainly before I could speak in any way intelligently, I'd probably have to chat with our finance folks and others. So it's something we can look further into and bring back to this committee if it's something that the committee has an interest in hearing more about.
Thank you again, Scott. Are there any more questions to our presenter? Seeing none.
I see Councillor Mackey, Mr. Chair. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Scott. Certainly lots of questions out there in regards to battery energy storage systems, in regards to ground-mounted solar, how ag fits in with ground-mounted solar. A couple of questions. With the exemption on prime agricultural land, how accurate is our mapping in Grey County that what is rural and what is prime ag land? And how was that? My understanding that there may have been some politics involved in the mapping was first done. So I'm just wondering how accurate our mapping is throughout Grey County. So that's the first question.
I am shocked that you would think politics would be involved with anything.
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a good question, Councillor Mackey. My understanding is, and I wasn't here at the time, Grey undertook a study in partnership with the province in approximately the mid-1990s. And that study was a precursor to the province developing what I've called the LEAR framework, the Land Evaluation Area Review. So my understanding is that study looked at not only the soil type in terms of whether it was a CLI class 1 to 7, also the lands around, was a particular piece of land in a larger contiguous block of farmland, or was it right on the edge of a settlement area, or what have you, and incorporated some other factors, as I've been told. And in some cases, those other factors were, keen local knowledge, where you had a farmer say, listen, I know this says it's a class 4, but I've been farming these lands for 50 years and they're very productive. And in some cases, I think we had some politicians that also gave their opinions in that regard. In the end, what happened was the county proposed mapping that was ultimately approved by the province. And we took those larger areas of quality farmland, and those became our agricultural lands, and sort of, generally speaking, the lesser lands became our rural, and then there was sort of separate rules for the specialty croplands in Meaford and Town of Blue Mountains in that regard. So that was done in approximately the mid-90s. We haven't done any major updates to that. What the province has told us since then is if you're going to update that mapping, they really don't want to see it being done on a case-by-case basis, like a farm-by-farm basis. They'd rather see it on the landscape level, so an entire municipality or an entire county in this regard. I will say that the Township of Southgate a number of years ago did some mapping updates in their township that found their way into the county plan, whereby, thinking particularly former Proton Township, used to be called Floatin' Proton, but there's been a lot of tile drainage and improvements made to the lands that took lands that previously we had designated as rural and made them agricultural in that regard. So there has been some increases in Southgate in that regard. But I will say, based on the scope of what that study would entail, the county hasn't gone back and done any major sort of reassessment since the mid-1990s. And then finally, I'll say that, so when we look at our mapping, we can see what we've designated ag and rural. We also have that soil quality mapping. So if we want to do sort of a quick gut check, we can see whether it's a class 1 or class 4 or what have you. So we have a bunch of tools at our disposal. And to get to your question more specifically, I'll say our mapping is pretty good. No mapping is ever perfect, but it's served us well for the past 25 or 30 years since it was developed.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Mr. Chair, my second question, Scott, you talked about the restrictions of ground-mounted solar on prime agricultural land. And, Paul McLean spoke about, pasturing of cattle or sheep underneath ground-mounted solar. So would that say that if you were, going to pasture sheep or pasture cattle and on a 50-acre chunk in prime ag, would that say it's still remaining within the ag? Like, is that still an ag use, I guess, is my question. So if the proponent said, I've got 50 acres in prime ag, I'm going to put up ground-mounted solar and I'm going to pasture sheep, it's not really being taken out of agricultural production, but how would the province weigh in on that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding through the most recent procurement intake is that ground-mounted solar was explicitly prohibited on prime ag. So again, not a legal opinion by any means, but it appears based on what they put out there that those simply wouldn't be eligible for contracts, even if you were grazing sheep underneath, like the sort of grass under glass model that has been spoken about in Southgate. If someone was looking at doing something more just for their own needs, then there might be more flexibility. But based on this most recent intake, they were saying that ground-mounted solar was explicitly prohibited in both prime ag and specialty croplands in that regard. So, when I was doing some research this morning, I looked up those lands in Southgate that do have that large farm on. They are all designated agricultural in our county official plan, but under the most recent procurement intakes, I don't believe they would have otherwise been eligible for an IESO contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you for your questions. Paul, you got your fingers up. You got a burning question.
I was just saying that the devil's advocate to that could be if you built cattle barns on that prime ag and put your solar panel on top of that barn, you're almost like doing the same thing but differently, because I think you could do that in prime ag. You can build a cattle barn, you build a 400-foot, 500-foot cattle barn, and then put all the solar panels on top. It just, there's sometimes needs to be some tinkering maybe on that part, and maybe I'm thinking on an MZO or something like that, but maybe those things that need to have those conversations outside the box with the province as well, and I just use that as a devil's advocate that's probably allowed. So
Well, thank you for that comment, Paul, because if I hear this morning, and I try to be neutral in the discussion, but the amount of electricity we're going to need in the next couple of years, how are we going to find a happy balance between land use and need? So that is the question that floats in my mind. So anyhow, I think we can close this part of the discussion.
I think there's 2 further questions. If you don't
Okay, I'm
mind,
sorry. I
Chair,
should
that's
move
okay.
my screen. Okay, you go.
We've
Whoever
got
the question.
Councillor
whoever the question-
Keaveney, and we also have CAO Schertzer.
Okay, go right ahead. Whoever has the questions. Okay. Okay. Shirley, that's your name there. I'll give the floor to you. Now are you mute?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. I just wondered if I could ask Scott, if I may, to share a little bit more for the committee about the impact assessment process and when that might kick in. If anybody was looking to put an energy project on their farm, whether it's a solar or a BESS or anything of that nature, just to help folks know a little bit about that process and what size of project would require that to kick in.
Through use, Chair, I actually was going to address this while the discussion was happening. Back to Blair's question and Councillor Keaveney's question. I did a quick research on MPAC's website, and I'll share the link in the chat. But looks like it depends on the size of the installation of whether or not your assessment will change or not. If it's less than 10 kilowatts, your property assessment won't change. It'll remain the same, whatever your current classification is for your property. If it's a medium installation, they say it might change. So it depends on the circumstances. And MPAC would obviously review that if it's between 10 kilowatts and 500 kilowatts. If it's a large installation, they're noting that will be reclassified likely to industrial as their classification. So over 500 kilowatts is what they define as large installations. So just to give you a sense of what MPAC looks at in terms of whether or not it's reclassifying properties from an energy project perspective, that's based on MPAC's information on their website. Again, as Scott indicated, we're happy to follow up further with MPAC to see if there's any further information that we can provide to the committee.
Thank you, Randy, for that insight. And did that answer your question? Hearing no comments or questions. Sorry there, Brittany, I maybe gonna lean on you again. I don't
No
see
problem. That's okay.
anybody. Any questions? No? Okay, I'll turn it back to you, and thank you very much for your presentation, Scott, and thank you very much for this lively discussion, because there's a whole lot more to it than what meets the eye from a layperson. So you go right ahead, Brittany.
All right. Can you see my screen there? I just shared the agenda. If you wanted to move on to item 5B, you can read out the motion there and get a mover and seconder before we pass it over to Sarah Johnson, our Trails and Forestry Coordinator.
Okay. Could I be so bold to ask you to read that?
Yeah, no problem. Yep, no problem. So this is for report PDR AAC 0926, a forest management bylaw update. And the motion is that report PDR AAC 0926 be received and that staff consider any further feedback received from the Agricultural Advisory Committee with respect to the county's forestry management bylaw update. And then if you could just get a mover and seconder for that.
Thank you very much for reading that, Brittany. And I do entertain a mover at this point.
I can move.
Okay, now okay, sorry, the computer is faster than I think. So
I think that was member Brenda.
Yes.
And Brenda and Andrea had their fingers up at the same time. So going by the alphabetic order, Andrea is the mover and Brenda is the seconder for this motion. Is that okay, Brittany?
Yes, that works great. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, call for the question. Everybody in favor of the motion? Or anybody opposed? Let's go that way. Anybody opposed to the motion? maybe state your case if you are opposed.
So, Mr. Chair, there is a report.
Yeah, so we can review the report and the details of the report, and then we can carry the motion at the end.
So you want to first discuss or the report?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go. Okay,
Yep,
you
yep.
go right
So,
ahead.
so Sarah Johnson, our Trails and Forestry Coordinator, will present the report, and then at the end of her report, we'll move the motion.
Sarah, gives the floor to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can everyone hear me all right? I am at home, and sometimes my internet isn't always the greatest.
Yep, we can hear you, Sarah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So this is just an update on our forest management bylaw, previous to the update that we had presented to the committee. I think we met back, actually, I think I had some dates on my next slide. Okay, there we go. So our forest management bylaw, we actually initiated this process, just to give you all a little bit of a background, in 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and so it kind of got tabled for a little while. And then we reinitiated the process early last year. But we did, before that, meet with the Agricultural Advisory Committee. I think it was December 2024, just to kind of get their support and you know, to have a discussion as to whether or not it was something that we wanted to bring forward, and we did get that support at that time. And so since then, we did present a report to County Council. They also gave us their blessing to move forward with the public process. The public open house, there was a public open house, sorry, that we hosted at Great Ag Services. That was on April 23rd of last year. And then we had a formal public meeting on May the 6th. So what has happened since then, obviously, is we've gathered a lot of comments and a lot of information. And so we just wanted to take this opportunity to provide the committee here with a little bit of an update. So basically, the big thing is, what have we heard? What have we heard? Did we get it right? And never in a million years did we think that our first round of our draft would have been correct and right. So we did have a lot of comments, and this is basically not all the comments. All the comments are in the report, or actually that's just a high level too. But the main comments are included in there, and these are the higher level ones. But one of the biggest comments that we did hear from the industry in particular was that circumference limit could not be, they did not want it removed. And that was something that we were really pushing for, because we wanted to get in alignment as much as we can with the highest environmental practices that we could, but understanding a little bit more about how the industry works and how strongly some of those individuals felt. We felt it was something, I'll get into detail later. I apologize. I have a little bit of a tickle in my throat today. So I might be coughing or clearing my throat a little bit, but it was one of those comments that we did hear, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in my presentation later. The other thing that we did hear specific, I tried to pull out some of the specific comments that were related to the agricultural sector. We did hear from the agricultural community that there was an importance to retain the ability to keep fields, to clear the trees when necessary to maintain a field in active production. And there shouldn't be an onerous process in order to do that. Other things that we heard were that fines needed to be increased, as well as if there is a fine, there should also be a requirement for replanting if deemed appropriate. That the bylaw should align with the Climate Change Action Plan and other policies and studies that have been passed since the bylaw. Already talked about replanting. And then one of the other big comments that we heard was that there should be an introduction of fees for permits and maybe increasing some of the existing application fees. Currently, right now, the only application fee that we have is for the minor exemption, which are the clear cutting applications. So there is a suggestion that we may introduce for those harvesting those managed forest harvest or managed cuts applications as well. So I'm just going to go on to my next slide here. The other thing that I touched upon in my report, in the recent I would say the last month, we've received comments from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation Environmental Office about the bylaw. So we haven't had a lot of time to digest those comments or review them and incorporate them in our existing working draft that we're working on right now. So we will look into those more prior to presenting to council, but we did want to touch upon them and acknowledge that we had received them and provide just a little bit of that information for the committee today to let you know what they have requested. A lot of their requests are regarding the inclusion of wording acknowledging traditional territory. They're looking for inclusion of stewardship rights and the ability to provide input a little bit more within the forestry management practices that are occurring within their traditional territory. They very strongly indicated that they did not support the clear cutting applications and that they should be eliminated, if not considerably reduced into how an individual can apply for one. They also requested consideration for incorporating culturally significant areas through the bylaw. They also commented about greater biodiversity and climate change language, which we had heard from prior to receiving these as well as incorporating cultural criteria into forest management standards. So we are, as I mentioned, reviewing some of these, all of these comments that we have received. We haven't had an opportunity to have a fulsome conversation with SON on these, but they have been received and are being considered. So obviously we are still considering, sorry, I just said that we were all considering, but before we can create the final version of the bylaw for council's consideration, staff have considered the other comments that we have received and have made some recommendations for the revisions to the bylaw, which include that reconsideration of the circumference limit. Now, I don't think what we're proposing right now is not just to include it back in as it was. I think we're going to try we're proposing that it's more restrictive. So the residual area of the remaining trees needs to be larger so that there is more of a base left after the harvest would occur. So that's one big thing that we are considering based on some of the comments that we received. We are also considering that those fees for the permit applications, as well as a consideration for increasing the existing fee. And then the remainder of things are minor administrative things that we have noted that needed to be updated. So what's next for us? Basically, we are looking for feedback from the advisory committee today, and we are going to continue to follow up on those comments. Obviously, the SON comments we are still looking into, and then the hope, as I drafted this presentation, I don't know if we'll hit that target of council in the spring, but I'm going to say spring, early summer, if we can get a draft back to council for their consideration. And that's basically kind of where we're at with this one in particular. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chair. If anyone has any questions or comments, happy to answer where I can and take down notes as you provide that information.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That was certainly an in-depth presentation, and reiterating the call for questions. Hearing or seeing none, I still see a shared screen here.
Yes, sorry, I'm trying to
so I'll
unshare.
try my best to be a bit more prudent this time. and use my clicker. I am sorry, I don't see any questions at
We
this
have
point. Okay,
Councillor
sorry.
McQueen. Yep.
Okay.
Councillor McQueen, yep.
Simon, you should always be looking at me. You never know what I might be saying.
It's true.
Just a quick comment. It's interesting with the comments from Son. I know that we just had a presentation about agricultural land, and there's probably certain reasons why. And I know there's a strict process on clear cutting, and whether there's trees that are in decay or dying, or maybe a plantation or something like that. But there's always that balance. I think what we're trying to find here. I just from against agricultural land and farmland. So I just make that comment in the sense of a previous speaker that talked about the farmland, and I did raise the point about there could be lands that could be re-cleared. I'm not sure where that may fall into with Son's comments, but we got to find that balance as well. So just a comment.
Right.
Thank you, Paul.
We've also got a
Okay,
question
sorry,
from
yeah.
Councillor Mackey.
Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think Paul basically touched on, my question. I just wondered if there's any conflict between this potential bylaw and being able to reclaim land. As our earlier presentation provided, we're losing farmland, and sometimes trees get planted by conservation authorities, and then 30 years later they turn into a significant woodland, and there's no opportunity to reclaim that farmland. So I just want to make sure that there is an opportunity when it makes sense to reclaim farmland because of the loss that we're seeing. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Scott. And just to be on the safe side, go back to Brittany.
I don't see any further questions at this point.
Okay.
So I think now you
So-
can ask for a motion to carry the report.
So asking for a motion to move the report presented. A mover and a seconder, please.
We already have a mover and seconder, so now we just
Oh, we
need
have
a-
to, that's right.
Yep.
Okay, so call for the question. That's a good thing you're there. Call for the question. Anybody opposed to the motion? Hearing none, that passes. Thank you all, and thank you, Brittany. So back to you.
No problem. So next we'll move on to item 5C, and it's report PDR AAC 1026 for the nuisance animal compensation bylaw update. And the motion is that report PDR AAC 1026 be received, and that staff consider any additional feedback received from the Agricultural Advisory Committee with respect to the county's nuisance beaver and coyote/wolf bylaw reviews. So if you could just get a mover and seconder for that, and then we can hear the report from Sarah once again, and then we can carry the motion.
Okay, well, looking for a mover and a seconder on this report. Is there a mover and a seconder? Two brave persons we need.
So it looks like we have hands up from Councillor Hutchinson and member Diane Booker.
Okay.
Would like to use them as their movers and seconders. We can use
Yes, thank you very kindly for your help.
Councillor Hutchinson for the mover and Diane
so
for the
yeah.
seconder.
Okay, so we got that done. So, and now you will present the report to us then, or Sarah will present the report to us. You go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me again. I'm going to try and share the screen again. Okay. So, can everybody see that again?
Yep.
All right. So this one's a little bit different because we had already previously provided the advisory committee with an update last September. So this is an update, another update, update 2. So since that last meeting, I just wanted to, again, we had a similar, we had that meeting in 2024. Sorry, I forgot that I had this slide here just to give you an overview of what we had done. We met with the Accessibility Advisory Committee in December of 2024, as we did with the previous bylaw or the forestry bylaw as well. We shared that open house with that as well on the 23rd of last year of April. And then we had a public meeting on May the 8th. And then we did provide an additional update to the advisory committee on these bylaws last September. And so basically since that last presentation to the the Agricultural Advisory Committee, staff have conducted additional research regarding the programs and methods for wildlife control. Many of the comments that we received in support of discontinuing the programs indicated that the lethal methods were counterproductive and caused the opposite effect of population control. So obviously we wanted to make sure that we had all the information and do further research into the matter. We obviously have heard strong arguments on both sides for keeping the bylaws, but also as well as discontinuing them. And as a result, have done considerable research on the differing options. However, if the county's bylaws are not effectively contributing to nuisance animal control, then it might be in the interest of the county to consider other options, whether it's now or whether it's in the future. From a legislative standpoint, there is not a requirement by the county to have these bylaws. And if any of the members may recall in my previous reports, there was some research done, and we did reach out to different municipalities, 11 other municipalities to be exact. And out of those that were contacted, only one had a beaver bylaw still in existence, and only 3 other had some variation of a coyote control bylaw. Landowners, however, regardless of any bylaw that's in place, landowners still have the ability to hire a hunter or trapper, or hunter trap themselves should they have those provincial qualifications. The bylaw itself isn't any kind of regulation with regards to hunting. It's simply a compensation program. It does provide an additional incentive to trappers, which could offset the cost to landowners. But again, it doesn't regulate hunting or trapping. Staff obviously do have some concerns that the bylaws themselves are not achieving the desired effect, and in fact are causing nuisance animal populations to increase. Increasing the payment for nuisance animals or even streamlining the processes under the bylaws could be helpful for those that provide those trapping services, but it actually may do little impact to reducing those populations. So as a result, staff are obviously wanting to share this information with the committee, as well as seeking further direction on the bylaws, including some options to amend or replace. So just to dive a little bit deeper, I don't want to go into any huge amount of detail on all the research that we did. I tried to be very concise in my report because it was a lot of information. But essentially, what we determined, and we did highlight one study that we found, was that speaking on the coyotes first, non-lethal methods were more effective as long-term deterrents. The study was obviously not the only study that came to that conclusion, but it did indicate that lethal methods, including bounty programs, tend to have temporary localized effects at controlling populations, and that in the long term, those populations will rebound and often increase over time in response to that. So they did, in the same study, talk about non-lethal methods that did prove to be very effective, which included habitat modification, exclusion techniques such as fencing, guard animals, which I know we've talked about around this table before, motion-activated sprinklers, and ultrasonic repellent devices. They all proved to be effective in deterring the animals, specifically coyotes, without causing harm. We did also look at live trapping and relocation. This in particular is not as effective based on restrictions within the province about under the hunting guidelines. You can only replace a certain distance or relocate a certain distance away, and with the territorial the way that the animals work, they'll just come back. So that one was not necessarily an option. However, in looking at both of these, both the lethal versus non-lethal, we do acknowledge that non-lethal methods obviously cost a little bit more or a lot more in some situations, but by no means do they eliminate problems 100% of the time. Similarly, looking at beavers, it's a similar outcome. We did find some information from the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and they noted the following: that often bounties remove the wrong beavers. For example, beavers that are easily trapped versus the ones that are actually causing the damage. And removing beavers may not solve the issue, as remaining beavers will create new dams or move into the habitat. They estimate that less than 10% of the beavers are actually causing the issues, and bounty programs target the population more indiscriminately. So with the non-lethal options with beavers, there were notable methods that include water level control devices, water flow device or culvert protection systems, and protective barriers. Similar to coyotes, the live trapping wasn't really something that was effective. And we do acknowledge that beaver control may not be as directly impactful to farmers as coyote control. But we do acknowledge that dammed water courses or blocked culverts can impact farmlands. So that is my brief overview of the research. It was a lot more than that, but I wanted to just touch on that a little bit before we got into the options as to what we might be considering when we're weighing everything out here. So if we decide to keep the bylaw, obviously it would the result. Why we're doing this in the first place was because we had received a comment from the trapping community that indicated that the compensation was too low. And in the case of both of the bylaws, the fees have remained the same for over 20 years. And there's been obviously inflationary costs to trapper and the increase that have increased significantly in that last 20 years plus. We've also had a considerable amount of comments noting that the process itself is very, specifically the coyote compensation process is very onerous. And for the benefit of the committee, I will do a brief overview of the steps needed to take in order to qualify for it. This is outlined in my report as well, but there needs to be a kill needs to occur. It needs to be confirmed by a livestock evaluator that is a municipal livestock evaluator. The livestock evaluator the livestock owner then can hire a licensed trapper or hunter. Those individuals will then kill the predator. The proof of that kill needs to be presented to the municipality. The municipality signs off on that and sends it to the county, and then the county reviews and approves, and then the payment is sent to the trapper. So there is a number of steps in that process. The staff are definitely open to options for streamlining that process, but in that there is a challenge as to which steps could be eliminated from the process. We've heard that the requirement for the livestock evaluator is a challenge. It's difficult, and we've also noted that in some cases where a livestock kill has occurred, the predator will take the entire carcass and there is nothing to evaluate. So that makes it really difficult. However, we do note that the removal of the livestock evaluator requirement could create a significant issue with unregulated compensation for the hunting of the animals. and we could see a marked increase in claims across the county, which could obviously have budgetary impacts and also lead to exploitation with the animals being hunted in other jurisdictions and claimed in Grey. We've also heard a lot of complaints about the need to go through the member municipality as well as the county for approval. Municipal sign-off and county approval applies to both the bylaws. However, the removal of one of the approvals would introduce an issue that if it's only the county that's verifying, number one, the county doesn't have a municipal livestock evaluator. Number two, it would require that all trappers present their proof of the kill to the county, which means they all need to come to Owen Sound. And if the physical evidence of a beaver and a beaver tail or coyote ears are still required, then the county would need to find a manner in which to dispose of those remains. So it does have some challenges with it. We have looked into considering something for presentation digitally, i.e. they can send a picture. Obviously that has some challenges as well, as it could be misused with people reusing photos or altering photos to get for multiple claims. So there's not a perfect scenario here that we have found to address that. In addition to all of the challenges that with the process itself, trapping in particular has lost a considerable amount of popularity over the last number of years, and those that have the qualifications are aging out, with smaller, younger populations not replacing them. Historically, the benefits of fur trapping animals were much more lucrative and profitable for pelts, was considerably higher, which in addition to the compensation that was through the bylaw, which in addition to compensation through the bylaw made it profitable. Obviously, $25 for a beaver claim in the 1990s is far more better than it is today. As a result, it was also common practice that trappers would complete trapping without a payment from the landowner. Some trappers would even seek agreements with landowners to have sole trapping rights on the property. Today, some trappers continue to not charge for services and have noted that landowners are reluctant to pay for trapping based on above the previously noted historic practices. So that, coupled with the increased cost of trapping and the decreased value for pelts, has resulted in many moving away and the retirement. And so finding those individuals to provide that service is becoming more challenging. Another thing worth noting and that we wanted to note was that from time to time, the county and the municipality will hire trappers specifically for beavers that impact local infrastructure. In these cases, the county does pay for these services, but under the current bylaw, the trappers could also be considered and eligible for reimbursement of that bounty. And so should the revised bylaw be the considered option, one modification to the bylaw would be to no longer provide compensation for trapping on public lands. The trapping would be solely covered by paying for their services. So that's if the bylaws were to remain. If they were discontinued, sorry, lost my place here. We do note that there could be implications for the agricultural community. We note that the protection of your property would still be permitted in that you could hire a trapper or hunt these predators, any predators, obviously within the provincial guidelines. It just would remove that compensation piece. Again, we don't regulate those practices through our bylaw. That's simply a compensation tool. Obviously, there could be an increase in cost for the agricultural community should they need to hire somebody for those services. And if that trapper is no longer eligible for compensation, that cost could be increased. If we did discontinue those programs, those other options, those non-lethal deterrents would, like the fencing, the guardian dogs, that sort of thing, could increase or would increase of the cost overall. But it does offer an opportunity for the county to reinvest those funds into things such as education, pilot projects, or potentially grants for landowners for abatement, including fencing. Currently, our budget allocates $15,000 for compensation under the beaver bylaw, as well as an additional $15,000 under the coyote bylaw. Other options, I guess, as opposed to just keeping or getting rid of, there could be the option as well as maybe eliminating one versus the other. So keeping the beaver and getting rid of the coyote, or vice versa. And in addition to this, there's also other ways that the county could assist if the bylaws were not to be continued or discontinued for that matter. If they were continued or discontinued for that matter. Keeping apprised, obviously, of the latest research and working with municipalities. I know that around this table, we have talked about maybe helping with those dog bylaws, those municipal dog bylaws, to have different requirements for working dogs, those guardian dogs that are required for protection. So then where does that leave us, and what are our next steps? Obviously, this additional information we wanted to present to the committee today for further feedback, but we also, feedback on the matter. Staff are really conflicted. We are hearing, obviously, both from the trapping and farm communities that these bylaws are a valuable tool and they should be updated and continued. But we've also heard and done research that is determining that they may be counterproductive in the actual control of the nuisance animal population. So any final recommendation that we do provide to council will need to balance, obviously, all the comments we've heard, the research, and provide all the good information that we can gather to council. So today, obviously, what we're hoping for after I stop talking is to get your feedback and your comments. And then our hope is, again, that spring, summer timeline to get a final draft of both these bylaws back in front of council for their consideration. So thank you for listening. That was a long-winded presentation that I just made, but again, I'm happy to take questions or hear your comments. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for that long, it was a long-winded, it was a very in-depth presentation, and there's a whole lot more to these things than a lay person would think. So are there any questions from the audience, please?
We have a question from Councillor Mackey.
Okay, go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Sarah. I know you've done a lot of work on this, and there is some very different opinions out there on how we should proceed. I just wanted to, I was at the public meeting that we had in Grey County Chambers, and I don't remember anyone that appeared for that public meeting not in favor of continuing or to increase the size of the bounty that we've got, both for beavers and for coyotes. I know you're getting other information from other people. I guess my concern is when we're looking at that information, when it comes from North Carolina, I'm not sure how pertinent it is in regards to what's going on in Grey County. So I know in an agricultural community, most of the farmers that I represent feel that the bounty is required to help mitigate some of the livestock kills. The livestock evaluator is working well in our municipality, providing compensation through his evaluation from the province. The bounty is just above and beyond what the province is providing for that livestock that is killed. So I would have a very difficult time supporting not continuing to have a bounty program, and I believe that it should be increased to compensate those that are looking after these predators. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul, you go right ahead.
Yep, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And some of our comments to what Scott is saying, I think you'd probably get a different perspective for those that own animals that have been affected versus non-farm owners, for one thing. But I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, a lot of our programs we do at the county, whether it's DC charges and everything, we do have a cost of living built into that. And that's one thing I think has been missing here is it hasn't kept up with it. And I know, Sarah, you talked about that. And I guess it would be interested to come back is what would that number be today if we had have implemented, 1.5 or 2% cost of living in that. So I think that gives us something to at least look at that. And obviously we know the cost of everything has gone up. And certainly if the subsidy or the bounty has not kept up with those costs, that could have some effect as well as nobody's, as much, taking up the program. So I just think that it would be interesting to have what that number could look like. Certainly with regards to beavers, we know that not only for landowners, farmers, we just, again, from our previous speaker here today about the importance of farmland and productive farmland, and certainly flooding of farmland is not something that's very productive for the agricultural side. So I think in the sense of having a program that at least helps control the beavers from the farmland perspective, and not only that, from the municipal standpoint with, we have water on the side of our infrastructure. It does. And you mentioned that as well. So I just think that certainly to have an idea what that number would be today, I think is something that's important. I know from Grey Highlands perspective, we do pay trappers, I think $25 or something. I saw something just recently with regards to beavers that they capture and stuff like that. And I know the municipality does hire people to trap beavers as well on their infrastructure. So it's not something that's going away. I will say, just in a summary side, I did talk, my dad, I said, like we haven't had, at least in the eastern part of Grey County, we don't have groundhogs anymore. And we used to, and nobody liked groundhogs because, Brian, you hit them with your tractor, you know what happens, right? And so we're not unhappy to not have the holes in the farmlands, but certainly, as predators change, the big part, I think, from groundhogs, other than Wyatt and Willie, they're not around anymore. And so, the big part, just my dad said when he was a kid, there wasn't coyotes. There just wasn't an issue. And, so things have changed. And I guess, like it's like everything, the prey and the predator part does change through different dynamics of how that is. So certainly is the comment with regards to it may not have an effect on the population, but certainly if the uptake has not been there because of the cost of living on that bounty, that may have an effect as well. I'll stop there, Mr. Chair, but thank you very much for that report.
Thank you, Paul. And Gail, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I didn't know we had beaver and coyote bylaws until when I got to Grey County in the early 2000. And it was brought to us because of the transportation. So I'm wondering if Mr. Pat Hoy has any comments from transportation on if there's a lot of beaver damage. And that's the reason why the bylaw was implemented, I believe, at that time, or even before that, because the beavers were damming up and then the water running over the county roads and causing a lot of nuisance. And so I'm just wondering, is there been a lot of damage? So if somebody from transportation could be able to answer that, then that's the reason why. But if there's no damage being done to roads and the beaver dams coming and going and whatever, I'm not sure. So I'm not on county council anymore, so maybe somebody else can answer that question. And thank you, Sarah, for the great report. We still have coyotes running on our property here, and I have a massive dog who's just petrified of them. So we keep them in when they are howling, and we protect our own dog from that. But yeah, I think it probably is a good thing to keep the bylaw. Both of them, and maybe increasing the amount just a small amount, because it has been the same for 26 years. So it's not much, but it still compensates people. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Scott, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the committee members for your comments. Member Ardell, just to address your comments first, certainly we can chat further with Transportation Services on those matters. I know both transportation and the planning department occasionally from time to time need to hire trappers with respect to impacts on infrastructure. And so in transportation, as you said, the county roads, and we've had to hire them for county trails in the past as well. There's been some culverts on the CP Rail Trail that the beavers have made a home near. So I think just to build on some of what Sarah has shared and some of the research that we did, there's not a lot of these bylaws across the province with other municipalities, and including in other counties and municipalities that have significant agricultural sectors in their boundaries. And what we've been hearing anecdotally, and we've had a lot of good conversations with sheep producers and others, is that the coyotes seem to be, and this is anecdotal, we don't have empirical evidence, more plentiful than ever. So we're seeing lots of coyotes. We're seeing a fair number of attacks on livestock. Luckily, we haven't seen much attacks on people yet, but we're seeing more and more. And so what we're trying to ascertain as staff is if we've been one of the only counties that's had these bylaws for years, and yet our populations seem to be continuing to grow, to put it bluntly, like, is there another way to come at this issue, trying to work collaboratively, of course, with farming and ag sectors that might have more of an impact? And Councillor Mackey, take your point that some of the examples cited in the report from, say, North Carolina or elsewhere might not be directly Grey County related, but our own planning ecologists and other local individuals have shared similar examples about the lethal control methods being short-term and temporal, and in fact populations increase. And so I think the worry as staff and as stewards to the Grey County budget in that regard, is that we didn't want to potentially recommend to council that the bounties increase and that we do more on the lethal method, if that's in fact having the opposite effect on beaver and coyote populations. And so certainly as staff, and Sarah, please jump in here too, I don't think we're necessarily jumping right to, okay, listen, we need to recommend doing away with these bylaws. But I think objectively, we also need to look at, are they achieving what we're trying to achieve? And that is better protection for our agricultural sectors, but also our infrastructure in terms of the beavers. And so, certainly the input you give is very valuable today. And as Sarah said, we're struggling with this as staff because we know we've heard, from the farm community, from the trappers that they feel they need these. But we're wondering if maybe there's other avenues that the county could explore, and I see Emily has her hand up too. Maybe there's further opportunities for partnership with Grey Ag Services to look at other control methods as well, that might better suit this issue we're having. So again, open to feedback. I don't say any of this to try to argue with the committee or your lived experiences in that regard. You know this way better than I do. But I just wanted to build on the perspectives that Sarah shared in that regard.
Thank you, Scott. And Emily, I'll give the floor to you.
Yeah, thanks. I was just wanting to comment that I absolutely agree with what was said. And Scott, you had really good points. Like, obviously, we don't want to be encouraging populations to rise with policies, but I also think it's important to remember that the lethal methods are really, really important for producers to have access to, because the non-lethal ones are really costly and they can take a long time to install if we're talking about fencing or guardian animals that need to be like found and purchased and trained and integrated with a flock or things like that. And I think that if a producer doesn't have like firearms license or like the ability to use those lethal methods themselves, then it's really important that we have a strong network of people who they can hire or can contact and help protect the animals. And I think that a lot of those producers have a really difficult time finding a trapper or a hunter to come and help them on their property. So if a bounty program could support like a group being in the area who can come in and do that kind of thing, that is still really important just in the meantime while producers are trying to actually address the problem with things like fencing or guardian animals or further steps afterwards.
Thank you, Emily, for those comments. And Scott, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wondered, I guess my question is for Mr. Taylor, just whether or not there'd be any data points, Scott, looking at, I know in our municipality, there's certain areas that are actively coyote hunted throughout the winter time. And, typically, in probably a 5 or 6 country block area, there's 50 or 60 coyotes that are taken out of those blocks in the wintertime. I'm just wondering if there'd be any data that we could look at the number of livestock kills in those 5 blocks compared to other blocks that aren't actively hunted to see if it actually is having an impact.
Thank you. Yeah, you go right ahead, Scott.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'll maybe give an initial response and then through you turn it back over to Sarah because she's done a lot of work on this. It's a great question, Councillor Mackey. When we get a claim, we get a form that talks about which trapper did the work, which farmer hired the trapper, and the location of that. So at a broad level, I think we could work with our mapping staff and maybe go through, the past few years of forms in that regard and start to plot those on a map and see if there's a bit of a heat map there, both for the beavers and the coyotes to say, is this a countywide problem or are we really talking about 3 or 4 concessions in each municipality where we're seeing sort of those repeat issues. So we don't have anything at our fingertips right now that would give us that level of information. Like we can tell you how much we've spent each year on beavers and coyotes and the claims in that regard. But we don't necessarily, because the county doesn't get involved in paying out for those livestock claims, we also don't have great information on the number of kills of livestock. What we've been hearing anecdotally, again, from different farmers from disparate parts of the county is it seems like, the numbers are up, but I know even in talking to members of this committee in the past, they've shared stories about, one farm being targeted over and over and over and another individual not too far away having no issues and both having similar levels of infrastructure in terms of fencing or what have you. So, I don't have great information. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything further to add there.
It's a really tricky thing to find because we only have the form information that we have. We haven't conducted any kind of mapping historically, this process also involved an additional step of involving the MNRF or whatever that they were at the time to have an additional sign off where they restricted the hunting area to 10 kilometers as to where the kill occurred. And so I think that's kind of stayed status quo, sort of, since that requirement was removed. But there is, as Scott said, we don't have any kind of mapping that would show that in particular. But it's certainly something that we could look into and see if we could figure it out a little bit further, a little bit more succinctly, if it is certain areas.
Thank you, Sarah. And Brian, you have a question there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And not so much a question as a comment and some observation of our own experience here. We have availed ourselves of the program a couple times in the last number of years. And the question I keep asking, and it was asked here earlier, is, are we achieving any ends with this program? And I'll say that the program at best is ineffective. If my infrastructure on the farm is being threatened by rising waters from beavers, I'm going to deal with that problem, because the infrastructure is worth way more than whatever somebody's going to give me for Sarah, I keep telling you, we're not calling it a bounty, it's a harvest fee. But nonetheless, whatever you want to call it, it's never going to compensate for the damage that potentially could happen on the farm. And as far as coyotes go, they are all around us here. We have 300 ewes in my son's flock. The coyotes are screaming and howling every night. I've seen them in the yard in broad daylight. They're all around us. And yet we have only lost, I think, a handful of ewes over the years. And that was because the storm went through and the electric fence was down before somebody realized that it was off. It only took the coyotes about a day to figure it out, but it took us a couple days to figure out. But nonetheless, the value of a ewe nowadays is it's not what a cattle beast would be valued at, but nonetheless it is valuable. So I'm not going to wait for the program. I'm going to deal with the problem, and I have to think that I would be supportive of get rid of the bylaw and let the ag community deal with the problem themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Paul, you got an additional comment or question?
Yeah, just interesting. Yesterday I was talking to a fella, he's 65, he has cattle, and he doesn't have anybody to take over. And I said, well, maybe you should switch the sheep. And he said, yeah, but then the coyotes will be knocking on my door every day. That was just a comment that he made. Anyway, he's farmed all his life. But I guess the point in a practical sense is, thank goodness the province still supports the program for the loss of those animals, because I know it's maybe been questioned over the years, but and there has been ups and downs on that program. But needless to say, if you have a few claims, then they require action, and maybe one of those actions is maybe better fencing or however, or having somebody sign a form that they're going to hunt the predator. But if you can't find, and if this program is one more way of creating that incentive for finding that hunter to, as required by the form, to get compensation if you have multiple claims or more than one or two claims, then is that one more step of not qualifying for the provincial program as well, which is, as Brian said, yes, the sheep maybe aren't as much, it's still a loss, it's still part of your income, more so with cattle or beef animals is, even as we know, the place of the value there as well. So I sort of think that there is other means to keep this program in place, and that's from a program or from a requirement from the province as well. So I'll leave it at that. But anyway, I think it should stay. It would be good that we did have a better idea what that would be from a COLA perspective of what that compensation would be today from when it originally started. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So any more discussion? So I saw a chat somewhere. So thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, I apologize, Chair, that we will need a new mover for that motion as we just need to verify quorum members. So if you could just get a new mover for that motion, then we can proceed with carrying the motion from the group.
Thank you, Brittany. I'll call for a mover for the motion.
Looks like
No.
member Gail Ardeel will move the motion for
Okay.
us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So if you have a second already, that's in place, Sarah or Brittany?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So call for the question. Anybody opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. So leaning on you again, Brittany. So we're proceeding to the next point.
Yep. So our next item is item 6, just sector trends and challenges. So I think this is just an open floor discussion.
Okay. Are there any comments or maybe admonitions or praises to people or systems? We're gladly entertain and maybe positive comments we like more than negative comments. Let's put it that way. Keith, thank you. You go ahead, Keith.
I will start with some positive news. Just last night, we had the Grey County Federation of Agriculture had the public speaking, the 80th annual. There was 26 students did speeches, and we had the mayor, the warden of the of Grey County in attendance as one of the judges, as well as the deputy mayor of Grey Highlands. We appreciate their support and. Lots of because it's Grey Ag or the Grey Federation putting it on. There's also awards for the best ag speech, and there was quite a few topics that were in check with ag, which is great to see and hear. So another successful evening last night. So just wanted to point that out.
Well, thank you, Keith. And eventually we'll hear who the winners were.
The winners were announced last night. I don't have the names in front of me, but there was top 3. It will likely be in the Rural Voice, the winners of that. So look for that in the next issue.
Well, thank you to you and the Grey County Ag OFA that for the efforts that they give this public speaking contest, not only to promote or make the students feel comfortable with public speaking, but also highlighting agriculture. Gail, you have your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. And I was wondering when I could raise this. So putting my town hat on here, being the chair of our agricultural committee, we will be hosting an event on April 7th. And we are co-hosting with the Blue Mountain Chamber of Commerce. We had a very successful event last year, and we had Keith Curry, Canadian Federation of Agriculture, and Dan Needles giving some comedy to our ag meeting. And we are hosting that again this year, April 7th from 6 to 8. And if anybody would be interested in coming, you can give me an email and I can put you on the list. It was pretty busy last year, so I'm hoping it will be the same again. We do have Keith Curry coming again, but we are looking for somebody else to have some comedy as well. And so that's one of the things that we've been doing, but our chamber wanted to integrate with the ag community because we have a lot of agritourism happening in our town now. So, and they are not involved with the chamber. It's just a way of, broadening their aspect out there with the chamber to help promote their businesses. And we have a lot of cideries who are new, and we're just doing helping hand to all. And also I had an email from the Escarpment Corridor Alliance. They're getting into agriculture too. And I was just wondering if this group would be interested in having conversation with them, or if they could be a guest speaker and, you know, just bring people up to speed on what the escarpment corridor is up to these days. And I just didn't know if this group was be interested in having them speak at this forum.
So knowing very little about the group, certainly maybe we should just look into it a little bit, and never hurts to broaden our horizon. And maybe if you can make a note of that, Brittany, that we can look into that. And thank you for your input there, Gail. And I see that Emily has her hand up on the screen. You go right ahead, Emily.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to share an update from Grey Ag and the Experimental Acres program. So just so everybody's aware, Grey Ag Services is about halfway through our winter course program right now. We have 8 more courses to go coming up in the next month or two. And next week we've got 4 actually going on. And one that I wanted to highlight was a Separating the Grain from the Chaff in Soil Health and Regenerative Agriculture webinar that's happening on Tuesday evening. So if anybody's interested in participating in any of our workshops, they're on our website, and we'd love to have you. On the Experimental Acres side of things, we had applications open through the month of February. They just closed, and I was happy that we have 20 very strong looking applications for that program. So the applications have been sent out to the review committee to look at over the next week and a half, and then we'll be having a review meeting and able to select those projects and notify participants by the end of April. So, or by the start of April, sorry. So looking forward to getting moving with those projects and seeing what the participants do over the summer. Thank you.
And thank you, Emily, for all that information. And we should not, I should look at the brochure, and because there's a couple of things that probably are of interest. Thank you again. Anybody else that has input, information, or whatever? Going by the weather forecast, spring is near, so probably see some chimneys smoke and boiling sap in the next couple of days again. So that's all good news. And else than that, I'm going to turn it back to Brittany.
Okay, so moving on to correspondence, we don't have any on this agenda. Any other business from any committee member?
Hearing none.
Yep.
Seeing none. I just go by hearing here, Brittany. You go by seeing.
And just noting the next meeting date will be Thursday, June 18th at 9 a.m. And then we can make a motion to adjourn. So we'll need 2 members to make that motion, Chair.
I'll ask, see Brian Mills, hand up there. And is there another brave soul? Do you see any there?
Looks like we had member Diane Booker for the
Okay, thank you, Diane.
All right.
Anybody opposed to this motion? Hearing none, wishing you all the best in all the spring activities and safety in your work and travels. And we'll see you in June and probably before. Thank you all.
Take care, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.